This is how to straighten up and true up a stamped metal fence like comes on your lower price saws. There are two adjustments here, but those are just used to make the fence, to adjust it so that it sits straight and square. But if the fence itself is not perfectly straight, you have to adjust that. And unfortunately, I had to fix this one. For about 2/3 of its length it was straight, but then at the end it started to pull over about 1/16 of an inch. So the first thing I did was check it like that, and I found out that it was pretty well vertical for the whole length except at the very end. So then I used this board to straighten it out and attached it with these T-nuts. Fortunately, there was already holes there, but if you didn't have them, you could just drill some. You just have to remember that this rod here goes all the way through at an angle down to here to adjust and clamp, so you don't want to hit that rod. So I clamped it down tight here because it knew it was straight, and almost tight here because it's still pretty straight. And then on the end, I put body putty or Bondo. And while it was still wet, I slowly pulled this in and checked it with a straight edge. And then because it tilted a little bit, I put a wedge in here to hold it a little bit farther out at the top. And then pulled it in and then let the Bondo set up. And I've got a nice straight edge. Okay, this is how I made a router table out of part of my table saw. I used the extension. And this only works if you have these stamped steel extensions because they're thin and you can drill through them. I used the top plate of the router as a guide to show me where to drill the holes and where I decided where I wanted it, and I drilled the holes, and I drilled this hole out. Then I covered these holes with tape and filled that low spot in with body putty. You can see it's like 1/4 inch deep or almost 1/4 inch deep. So I filled that whole thing in with body putty, and it took several times. Then I used to set up something like this and put my router on there and routed across and smoothed out that body putty. And then I'd move it over and do some more, and smoothed all that body putty out with the router, then finish sanded it. Okay, so then the router is mounted in there. I've only got about 7 inches of travel that I can work before I run out, but I couldn't move it over anymore because this adjusting handle for the saw is here, and so that's where I had to mount it, but it works good for most purposes. Okay, next I screw on this plate here as a guide. So now I can adjust my depth, and I can slide this back and forth to get the depth of the cut this direction if I want to cut something on the very end of a board. If I'm not working on the very end of the board, then of course I take this off and just use this board as my guide. One thing to be careful is with the vibration and the weight of the router, it will have a tendency to drop down as you're working. It can change the setting, so you have to really clamp it down tight. When I'm not using it, I stuff some paper in here to cover that up, otherwise dust and dirt and everything else falls down into the router.